This is a story about what happens when the last living thing a man cares for is taken from him, about the choice between justice and vengeance, about a boy who became a killer and an old man who learned to live with what that cost. Before we walk this blood trail together, if this story's already got hold of you, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're hearing this right now. Because what follows is truth hard and unforgiving as the Arizona desert itself, Montana. September 1952. The wind moved through the pines like a whispered confession, carrying the smell of approaching winter down from the high country. In a weathered cabin at the edge of the wilderness, an old man sat in a rocking chair that creaked with the rhythm of decades. The fire in the stone hearth had burned low, throwing shadows that danced across log walls covered with the artifacts of a long, solitary life. Jacob Brennan was 85 years old. His hands, gnarled and scarred, rested on the arms of his chair, with the stillness of a man who'd learned patience the hard way. His face was a map of hard miles, deep lines carved by wind and sun, and things he'd never spoken of. On the mantel above the fire sat a daguerreotype in a tarnished silver frame. The image showed a lean young man, barely more than a boy, standing beside a massive wolf dog. The boy held a rifle with easy familiarity. His eyes, even in the faded photograph, carried something ancient. Jake hadn't looked at that photograph in years. Tonight he couldn't look away. The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and the sound of boots on pine boards. Will Brennan stepped inside, 19 years old and trying hard not to show how scared he was. His army uniform was new, the creases still sharp, the insignia bright. Tomorrow morning he'd board a bus that would take him to basic training, then to a war on the other side of the world. Korea, a place he couldn't find on a map 6 months ago. "Couldn't sleep, Grandpa," Will said, closing the door against the wind. Jake turned his head slowly, the way men do when their necks carry old injuries. He studied his grandson in the firelight, saw the fear Will was working so hard to hide, saw the boy's hands smooth and unmarked, saw himself at that age before everything changed. "Sit down, son," Jake said. His voice was like gravel rolling in a creek bed. "Got something needs telling before you go." Will hesitated. He'd heard his grandfather's stories, hunting tales, survival wisdom, the kind of practical knowledge a man accumulated over 8 decades in wild country. But something in Jake's tone tonight was different, heavier. "Grandpa, I've heard all your hunting stories. I know about the grizzly in '09 and the winter you got snowed in at Bitterroot and—" "This ain't about hunting," Jake interrupted. He reached for the flask on the side table, poured amber liquid into 2 glasses with the care of ritual, held one out to Will. "This is about the only time in my life I picked up a gun for reasons that had nothing to do with meat or pelts." Will took the glass, sat in the chair opposite his grandfather. The whiskey burned going down. Good burn. Honest. Jake's eyes drifted to the photograph again. "You're going to war. You'll be asked to kill men. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But if you do, it'll be because your country asked it, because your brothers in arms need it. That's one kind of killing. Heavy but clean enough to carry." He paused, took a long swallow from his glass. "There's another kind. Killing for revenge, for hurt, for the hole in your chest that won't close, no matter how much blood you pour into it. That kind, that kind eats your soul from the inside out, takes everything good and turns it into poison." Will leaned forward, drawn in despite himself. "What are you talking about?" Jake set his glass down with the careful precision of a man making a choice he couldn't take back. "I'm talking about the year 1885, when I was 18 years old. The summer 5 men rode onto my land and killed the only living thing I had left to care about." The fire popped. Sparks climbed toward the chimney like souls seeking escape. "They killed my dog Will, a wolf dog named Old Red. And what I did after, what I became, that's the real story. The one I never told your father. The one I never told anyone." Jake closed his eyes. The present fell away like shed skin. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, younger, harder, haunted. It started with blood in the dust and boot prints circling a body that was still warm. Arizona Territory, 1885. The sun hadn't cleared the eastern ridgeline when young Jake Brennan rode back into his camp. Dawn light painted the Badlands in shades of rust and bone, the kind of light that made everything look ancient and temporary at the same time. He sat easy in the saddle, a young man who'd grown up hard and fast, learned to read land the way other boys learned to read books. 3 rabbits hung from his saddle horn, necks cleanly broken. A beaver pelt, still wet from the creek, was tied behind his bedroll. Good haul, enough to trade at the post for ammunition and coffee, maybe some tobacco if the trading went well. He whistled 2 sharp notes that carried across the empty land. The sound he'd used for 12 years, the call that always brought Old Red running, tongue lolling, eyes bright with simple joy. Silence answered. Jake frowned. Red was getting old, sure. 12 years for a dog that size was ancient. But he still came when called. Always, every single time since the day Jake's father brought home a wolf pup with fur the color of rust and said, "This one's yours, boy. You raise him right, he'll be loyal till death." The frown deepened. Jake nudged his horse forward, scanning the camp. The lean-to he'd built against a rock outcropping stood undisturbed. His small fire from last night had burned to ash. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it 2 hours before dawn. Except something felt wrong. The way the air feels before a lightning strike. The way silence sounds when it's too complete. Jake dismounted, let the reins drop. The mare knew to stand ground-tied. He walked through camp eyes, tracking details the way Ezekiel Stone had taught him. Old Ezekiel the trapper, who'd found a 12-year-old boy and a wolf pup half-starved in the wilderness 6 years back. Who'd raised Jake when his father couldn't anymore, when his father was dead. The tracks hit him first. Boot prints fresh from this morning, 5 sets circling something 50 yards from camp. Jake's hand dropped to the Colt revolver at his hip, his father's service weapon, worn grip smooth from years of use. He moved toward the prints, each step careful, quiet. Then he saw Red. The dog lay on his side in a patch of bare earth, the dust around him dark and wet. 6 bullet holes punched through his gray coat, the wounds clustered tight like whoever did it had taken their time, like they'd stood close and made it count. Old Red's eyes were open, already filmed over with the white haze of death. His tongue hung from his mouth, dust clinging to it. Jake stopped 10 feet away. Stopped breathing. Stopped being 18 years old. He didn't run to the body, didn't cry out, didn't move at all for a long moment, frozen in the place between disbelief and understanding. Then slowly, like a man walking through deep water, he crossed the remaining distance and knelt in the blood-soaked earth. His hand touched Red's shoulder. Still warm. Barely. The body heat fading fast in the morning chill. Jake's fingers found the familiar ridge of scar tissue where Red had taken a rattlesnake bite when Jake was 14. Found the spot behind the ears where the dog loved to be scratched. The fur there was soft, untouched by bullets. Jake's jaw clenched. That was the only outward sign. His face remained still, carved from the same stone as the Badlands around him. But inside, something cracked. Something fundamental. He stood, studied the boot prints circling the body. 5 sets of tracks, clear as words on a page. Ezekiel had taught him to read sign, and these men had made it easy. Almost like they wanted him to read it. First set, worn heel on the left boot, drag mark where the foot pulled slightly. Old injury, maybe a bad hip. Man favored his right side. Second set, new leather, small size. Young man, probably vain. Boots that cost money, kept polished. Third set, moccasin boot hybrid, the kind made by Indian traders. Soft sole, no heel. Man who valued silence over support. Tracker likely. Part native or lived with them long enough to learn their ways. Fourth set, deep impressions, wide stance. Big man, 200 pounds easy, maybe more. Heavy stepper, didn't care about noise. Fifth set, military issue boots, standard army pattern. Polished despite the dust. Man with discipline, or one who'd worn a uniform long enough, it became habit. Jake committed every detail to memory. Then he noticed the bottle. Empty whiskey bottle lying on its side 20 feet from Red's body. Place not dropped. Cork removed. The glass caught the rising sun through amber light. Jake walked to it, careful not to disturb tracks, lifted it by the neck. Fingerprints greased the glass. He sniffed the opening. Good whiskey. Expensive. Not the rot gut that drifters drank. This was deliberate. This was a message. Jake's eyes found the tree. 20 yards away, a scraggly cottonwood clung to life in a dry wash. Something carved into the bark caught the light. He walked over, hands still gripping the bottle. The words were crude, cut deep with a hunting knife. Crowley sends his regards. Jake stared at the name, felt it hit him like a fist to the gut. Crowley, Silas Vance Crowley. The name his father had spoken with the kind of hatred that comes from looking pure evil in the eye and seeing it smile back. 9 years ago, Jake had been 9 years old when his father, Marshal Thomas Brennan, had ridden out to arrest a man named Crowley. Army scout turned outlaw, war criminal, thief, killer. The charges had filled 2 pages of court documents, but what mattered most was simple. Crowley had murdered Apache women and children, blamed it on renegades, stolen Army gold in the confusion. Jake's father had tracked him for 3 months, brought him back in irons. Crowley had looked at 9-year-old Jake standing on the courthouse steps and said, voice carrying clear in the summer heat, "Your son will pay for this, Marshal. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I got time, and I got a long memory." 6 years ago, when Jake was 12, Crowley's gang had attacked their ranch, shot it to pieces, killed Jake's father in a firefight that left the house burning and the land soaked with blood. Jake had run into the wilderness with Red, a 6-year-old dog, and a terrified boy, survived 2 weeks on rainwater and raw fish before Ezekiel found them. Crowley had gone back to prison, but now apparently he was out, and he'd sent 5 men to kill a dog. Jake's hand tightened on the whiskey bottle. The glass creaked but didn't break. He set it down carefully, fighting the urge to smash it, fighting the urge to scream, fighting everything except the cold certainty settling into his bones like winter frost. He walked back to camp. From his lean-to, he pulled the oiled canvas bundle he hadn't touched in 3 years. Not since Ezekiel died and left Jake alone with nothing but skills and solitude. The bundle unrolled to reveal a Winchester Model 1873 rifle. 44-40 caliber lever action, the metal still gleaming despite years in storage. Ezekiel's rifle passed to Jake with the old man's last breath. Next to it, wrapped in cloth, was Jake's father's Colt single-action Army. 45 caliber 7.5-inch barrel walnut grips, worn smooth by Thomas Brennan's hands over years of service. Jake checked the rifle first, worked the action, smooth as water, loaded 15 cartridges into the tube magazine, one in the chamber. Then the revolver, cylinder spun true. He loaded 6 rounds, the metallic click of each one seating like heartbeats he could control. From a buried cache, he retrieved his father's gun belt, heavy leather dark with age and oil. The belt had ridden his father's hips through a dozen shootouts, been there the day he died. Jake buckled it on. The weight pulled at him, familiar and foreign at once. He was 18 years old. He'd killed deer, elk, bear, skinned them, butchered them, turned them into meat and hide in survival. But he'd never killed a man, never wanted to. That changed now. Jake knelt beside old Red one more time. The dog's body had gone stiff, locked in the sprawl of violent death. Jake closed the clouded eyes, the lids already starting to stiffen. He worked for an hour in silence, using the shovel from his camp to dig a grave beneath the cottonwood where he'd found the message. The ground was hard, full of rocks, and each thrust of the blade sent pain through his shoulders. Good. He wanted the pain, wanted to feel something other than the cold void opening inside him. When the hole was deep enough, he lifted Red. The dog was heavy, dead weight, pulling at his arms. Jake laid him in the earth, positioned his paws the way Red used to sleep, curled and peaceful. For a moment, he just looked at his oldest friend, his only friend, really, the companion who'd never asked for anything but food and a scratch behind the ears, who'd waited by his bedroll every night, who'd greeted every dawn with tail wagging like each new day was a gift. Gone now, murdered, not for food or threat or even mercy, murdered to send a message. Jake filled the grave slowly. Each shovelful of earth felt like he was burying part of himself. When the mound was complete, he patted it smooth with his palm, the same gesture he'd used to calm Red after long days on the trail. He stood. The sun had climbed higher, turning the sky white with heat. Jake looked at his hands, dirt under the nails, calluses from trap lines and skinning knives, and the hard work of staying alive alone. 18 years old, and his hands looked 40. From his pocket, he pulled Ezekiel's hunting knife. The old trapper had carried it for 50 years, the blade worn thin from decades of sharpening. Jake drove it into the earth at the head of Red's grave, left it there as a marker, a symbol, giving up the peaceful life, choosing the gun over the knife. He walked to his lean-to, pulled out his traveling pack, loaded it with jerky hardtack ammunition, filled his canteen from the spring, rolled his bedroll tight, attached everything to his saddle with the efficiency of long practice, mounted his horse. The mare shifted under him, sensing the change in her rider's tension. Jake looked north. Redemption Creek lay 2 days' hard ride in that direction. Town big enough to have a saloon, which meant men who drank would talk. Men who talked would give him names, faces, locations. 5 sets of boot prints leading away from his camp heading north. 5 men who thought killing a dog was funny, who'd stood in a circle and taken turns putting bullets into an old animal who'd done nothing but exist. Jake touched his heels to the mare's flanks. She stepped out, hooves quiet in the dust. Behind him, the cottonwoods sighed as wind moved through its sparse leaves. The fresh grave lay in morning shadow, the knife blade catching sunlight like a promise. Jake didn't look back. He kept his eyes forward, locked on the horizon where 5 men rode laughing, probably drinking from that expensive whiskey, thinking they'd gotten away with something small. They were wrong. The voice of old Jake, 1952, whispered through the years, "I told myself it was justice, that father would have wanted it, that Ezekiel would have understood. But the truth, I didn't admit until it was too late. I wanted them to hurt, wanted them to feel what I felt, wanted to watch the light go out of their eyes the way it went out of Red's. That's not justice, that's poison." And I was already drinking deep. 2 days in the saddle, Jake rode hard but not reckless the way Ezekiel had taught him. A man could cover ground fast if he knew when to push and when to let the horse rest. He stopped twice each day to water the mare, let her graze while he chewed jerky and studied his back trail. No one followed, but then no one needed to. The tracks leading north were clear enough. 5 horses shod, moving with the casual pace of men who felt safe. Men who thought 18-year-old trappers didn't have the sand to come after them. Jake followed those tracks like reading a story written in dust. The land changed as he rode. High desert gave way to rolling hills spotted with juniper and scrub oak. Dry washes cut through red earth, exposing layers of stone laid down when this country was ocean floor. Jake had loved this land, once its harsh beauty, its honesty. Out here, nothing lied. If you were weak, you died. If you were strong and smart, you survived. Simple. Now the land just looked empty. On the second evening, he made camp in an arroyo that offered concealment and good sightlines. Built a small fire just enough to heat coffee and warm beans. The Winchester lay across his lap while he ate. His father's Colt rode his hip even when he slept, one hand always on the grip. He finished his meal as full dark settled. Stars appeared sharp and cold in the clear air. Jake poured the last of his coffee, sat with his back against smooth stone, still warm from the day's heat. The silence pressed in, broken only by the occasional yip of distant coyotes. For the first time since finding Red, he let himself remember. Not the death, the life. He was 6 years old, standing in the yard of a ranch that didn't exist anymore. His father rode in leading a horse with a blanket-wrapped bundle tied across the saddle. Thomas Brennan dismounted his marshal's badge, catching sunlight, and unwrapped the bundle, careful as glass. A wolf pup, maybe 3 months old, fur the color of rust, eyes still blue with youth, ribs showing through thin skin. The mother had been killed by hunters who shot first and thought never. "His name's Red," his father had said, handing the trembling pup to young Jake. "You're responsible for him now. Feed him, train him. He'll be loyal till the day he dies, but only if you earn it." Jake had taken the pup in his small hands, felt the rapid heartbeat against his palms. Red had looked up at him with those blue eyes, already trusting, and licked his fingers once with a tiny pink tongue. 12 years they'd been together after that. Through his mother's death when Jake was 7. Through the lean winters and the hard summers. Through the day his father died and Jake's world ended the first time. Red had been there for all of it, asking nothing, giving everything. And now Red was dead because of a name. Because a man Jake barely remembered had decided to reach across 9 years and 1,500 miles of prison walls to hurt a boy who'd done nothing but be born to the wrong father. Jake threw the rest of his coffee into the fire. It hissed, sent up steam that smelled bitter. Tomorrow he'd reach Redemption Creek. Tomorrow he'd find the first name, the first face, the first set of boot prints. Tomorrow the reckoning would begin. He laid down, pulled his blanket over him against the desert night chill. Sleep came hard, full of dreams that weren't quite nightmares, but weren't peaceful either. In them, Red ran ahead on a trail, young and strong, looking back to make sure Jake was following. Always looking back, always waiting. When Jake woke just before dawn, his face was wet. He touched his cheek, found tears there, wiped them away with rough swipes. No time for that. No room for it. Grief was a luxury and revenge was work. He saddled the mare in the pre-dawn gray, rode out as the sun broke the horizon. Redemption Creek appeared as a smudge on the northern horizon by mid-morning. By noon, Jake could make out individual buildings. Standard frontier town, one main street running east-west, false front buildings on both sides, a church at one end, saloon at the other, all the commerce and sin in between. Jake approached slow, studied the town from a rise a half-mile out, counted maybe 40 buildings total, population probably 200 when the nearby ranches came in for supplies, big enough to have loss, small enough that a stranger would be noticed. He rode in at a walk, keeping the mare to a steady pace that didn't draw attention. Tied up at the livery stable, paid the boy there 2 bits to rub her down and give her grain. The boy, maybe 14, red-haired and freckled, looked at Jake's trail-worn clothes, the rifle in its scabbard, the way the colt rode his hip. "You a lawman, mister?" "No." "Bounty hunter?" "No." "Then what?" Jake handed him another 2 bits. "I'm looking for 5 men. Rode through here 2, maybe 3 days back. Loud. Drinking. One of them has red hair like yours. Talks too much." The boy's eyes went wide. Recognition. "Oh, yeah, they were here. At the Golden Spur." He pointed down the street toward a 2-story building with a painted sign showing a boot with a spur. They were real loud, whooping and carrying on. Sheriff had to tell them to quiet down or get out. They still in town. One of them is, the redhead, Tommy something. Heard him say he was staying a few days. Likes the poker here." The boy paused. "You got business with him?" Jake looked at the boy, saw youth and innocence in a future that didn't involve standing over graves. "Stay out of the street for the next hour," he said. Then he walked toward the Golden Spur, spurs ringing soft on the hard-packed dirt. The saloon was exactly what Jake expected. Rough planked floor bar along one wall, tables scattered in the open space stairs at the back, leading to rooms where the working girls earned their keep. Smelled like every saloon he'd ever walked past. Sawdust, spilled beer, tobacco, smoke, unwashed men. It was early afternoon. The place was half full. Card players, day drinkers, a few men who looked like ranch hands having a meal between jobs. 2 women in faded dresses worked the room, smiling at men who'd buy them watered whiskey for the privilege of temporary company. Jake stood in the doorway, let his eyes adjust to the interior dimness, scanned faces, dismissed most, then found what he was looking for. Tommy Red Harlan sat at a corner table, cards fanned in one hand, whiskey glass in the other. He was everything the boot prints had suggested. Young, maybe 24, cocky grin, red hair slicked back with pomade, new clothes that cost more than they should. 2 other men at his table, locals by the look of them, playing cautious poker with a stranger who had money. Tommy was talking, loud, the kind of loud that said he was 2 drinks past discretion and 3 past caring. "I'm telling you," Tommy said, slapping his cards down. "Easiest money I ever made. Old man Crowley pays us 500 each just to ride out to the middle of nowhere and shoot some trapper's dog. That's it. Not the trapper, just the dog." One of the locals shifted, uncomfortable. "Why do you want the pound dead?" "Who cares, $500 to put bullets in a mangy wolf? Hell, we had fun with it. Stood around, took turns. Pop, pop, pop." Tommy made gun gestures with his fingers, grinning. Thing just sat there whimpering, didn't even try to run. The second local pushed his chair back. "That ain't right." "Ain't right," Tommy laughed. "It's a dog. It's not like we killed a person. Though Crowley says we might get that chance too. Says the trapper's boy will come looking. Hope he does. I could use more target practice." Jake walked forward, slow, deliberate, boots loud on the floorboards. The saloon started to notice. Conversations died in ripples, spreading out from Jake's path like a stone dropped in still water. Men turned to look. The bartender's hand dropped below the counter where the shotgun lived. Tommy was still talking, hadn't noticed the silence. "And the best part is the kid's probably too scared to do anything. Crowley says he's just some 18-year-old who plays at being a mountain man. probably crying over his. Turn around, Jake's voice cut through the room. Not loud, didn't need to be. Every ear was already listening. Tommy stopped mid-sentence, turned his head, saw a lean young man standing 20 feet away, trail dust on his clothes, a Colt at his hip, and eyes that looked older than the face they lived in. Who the hell are you? You know who I am, Jake said. You talked about my dog, said you shot him 6 times, said he whimpered, said it was easy. The blood drained from Tommy's face, started to come back as angry red in his cheeks. He stood fast, chair scraping. You're the trapper's kid. I'm Thomas Brennan's son, the marshal you people murdered 6 years ago. The man your boss Crowley spent 9 years hating from a prison cell. Jake's hand hung loose by his Colt, relaxed, ready. And you killed the only thing I had left. Tommy's hand twitched toward his gun, stopped, started again. Fear and pride wrestling in his expression. The room watched. Nobody moved. This was the kind of moment that defined men, the kind where you found out what you really were under all the talk. It was just a damn dog, Tommy said, a voice higher than he wanted it. Just a stupid animal. You going to dish over a dog? I'm not the one dying, Jake said. Kid, you don't want to do this. I'm faster than I look, and I got friends. Draw your gun. Now listen here. Draw your gun. Tommy's face went through a series of changes, realization that this wasn't going away, that the kid in front of him wasn't going to back down or be scared off, that words had run out, and all that was left was steel and powder, and which man's hand was steadier. Tommy went for his gun. He was fast, genuinely fast, the kind of fast that won saloon fights and left bodies in the street. His hand blurred to his hip, closed on walnut grips, started the draw. Jake's hand moved, no thought. Pure reaction trained by hours of practice in empty canyons where Ezekiel had drilled him until the motion was smoother than breathing. Draw. Thumb the hammer. Sight, picture. Press. The Colt clear-eye leather came level fired before Tommy's gun was halfway out of the holster. The .45 round hit Tommy dead center in the chest. The impact knocked him backward. His own gun fired into the floor, a reflex death spasm. He hit the table, flipped. It went down in a crash of wood and cards and spilled whiskey. Silence fell absolute. Gun smoke drifted lazy in the still air. Jake stood, frozen, Colt still extended, hammer back for a second shot that wouldn't be needed. He watched Tommy on the floor, watched the man's eyes go wide with the kind of surprise every young killer feels when death arrives on schedule. Watched him try to draw breath and fail. Watched the light fade. It took maybe 30 seconds, felt like hours. When Tommy finally went still, eyes staring at nothing, Jake lowered the Colt. His hands shook now. Just a tremor, but he felt it. The gun was hot. The smell of burned powder filled his nose. He'd just killed a man. Jake walked forward on legs that felt distant, knelt beside the body, reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a playing card. Ace of spades, the death card. He'd taken it from a deck in his camp, carried it just for this moment. He placed it on Tommy's bloody chest, stood, turned to face the room. Every eye on him, fear, shock, recognition starting to dawn in some faces. The bartender spoke first. Old-timer gray beard, seen too much to be surprised by anything. That's Marshal Brennan's boy, Jacob. Heard he went into the mountains after his daddy died. Went quiet. Jake's voice came out steady despite the tremor in his hands. I did. They made me unquiet. He holstered the Colt, walked toward the door. Nobody stopped him. Nobody spoke. They just watched him go, a young man who'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright, too bright. Jake made it 3 steps from the saloon, stumbled into the alley beside it, bent over and vomited. The jerky and coffee from breakfast came up bitter. His whole body shook now, adrenaline draining away, leaving him hollow. He'd killed a man. First time. Shot him dead in a saloon with witnesses watching. Legal, probably. Self-defense clear as day. But legal didn't change the weight of it. Jake wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, straightened, walked to the livery on legs that wanted to buckle. The stable boy was inside, eyes huge. He'd heard the shot. Whole town had. My horse, Jake said. The boy brought the mare out, already saddled. Smart kid. knew when it was time for someone to leave fast. Jake mounted felt the familiar comfort of leather and horseflesh. "Mister," the boy said. "The other four, the ones who rode with him." Jake looked down. "What about them?" "I heard Tommy talking yesterday. Said they were splitting up, meeting back at some place called Bitter Springs in a week, some old fort." "You hear any names?" The boy nodded. "One was called Snake Eyes, another was Hack. That's all I got." Jake reached into his pocket, pulled out a silver dollar, tossed it to the boy. "Stay out of trouble." Then he rode out of town north toward the Badlands, putting distance between himself and the body, cooling on the saloon floor. The sun started its drop toward the western horizon. Jake's shadow stretched long ahead of him. Four more. Four names waiting. Four sets of boot prints to follow. And somewhere behind them, all pulling strings, orchestrating this from the shadows, Silas Vance Crowley. Jake made camp that night in another dry wash 20 miles from Redemption Creek. He built a tiny fire just enough for coffee. Couldn't eat. His stomach was still twisted from the killing. He cleaned the Colt methodically, wiped the blood speck from the grip he'd missed, reloaded the empty chamber. The ritual calmed him some, gave his hands something to do while his mind tried to process what he'd become in the span of a single trigger pull. Killer. That's what he was now. No matter how justified. No matter that Tommy had drawn first. Jake had ended a human life. Watched the light go out. And what terrified him most, sitting alone in the darkness with nothing but the truth for company, was how easy it had been. The draw, the shot, the fall. Simple as killing a deer. Simpler, actually. Deer ran. Tommy had just stood there, too slow and too stupid to live. From his saddlebag, Jake pulled out a folded piece of paper he'd found stuffed in Tommy's vest when he'd placed the death card. Must have fallen out during the scuffle. He unfolded it by firelight. A letter, written in careful feminine handwriting. "Dear young Mr. Brennan, you don't know me. My name is Abigail Harlan. I'm Tommy's aunt. I'm writing this because my nephew is caught up in something evil, and I pray to God you'll read this before it's too late. 3 months ago, a man named Silas Vance Crowley came to our town. He gathered 5 young men, Tommy among them. He told them terrible things about you, said you were a killer who murdered your own father for his badge, said you trained that wolf dog to hunt men, said you were wanted for crimes too dark to speak aloud. He showed them proof, photographs I'm certain were doctored, wanted posters I believe were forged, but they believed him. My nephew believed him. Crowley paid them $500 each to kill your dog, not you, just the dog. Make him come to you," Crowley told them. "Make him chase you. Then we'll see what kind of monster he really is." I tried to stop Tommy, begged him, but he's young and foolish, and $500 is more money than he'd see in a year of honest work. He said it wasn't wrong, just a dog, just following orders. By the time you read this, Tommy will be dead, or you will. I'm begging you, if there's mercy in your heart, remember they were lied to. They're fools, not monsters. They don't understand they're pieces in a game they can't see. Please, Mr. Brennan, don't become what Crowley says you are. Abigail Barlin. Jake read it twice, then a third time. Each pass made the knot in his stomach tighten. Tommy hadn't known. He'd believed he was hunting a killer, believed he was on the side of right. Crowley had poisoned him with lies and sent him like a weapon aimed at Jake's heart. And Jake had killed him for it. He looked at his hands in the firelight. They'd stopped shaking. That scared him more than the shaking had. His hands were steady, ready for the next one. The letter slipped from his fingers, landed in the fire. Edges blackened, curled. Abigail's careful words turned to ash and smoke. Jake pulled his blanket around his shoulders, stared at the flames. Tomorrow he'd start tracking the others. 4 more men who probably believed the same lies. 4 more puppets dancing on Crowley's strings. 4 more graves he'd have to dig if this played out the way it was starting to. From the darkness beyond the firelight came a sound. Footsteps. Deliberate. Loud enough to announce themselves as not hostile. Jake's hand went to his Colt anyway. "Easy, boy," a voice said. "I ain't here to fight." A man stepped into the light. Tall, lean, hard angles and sun-darkened skin. His face was a mix of features, native and white blended. He wore moccasin boots, the soft-soled kind, that left the tracks Jake had seen circled around Red's body. His eyes were pale gray, unsettling in a copper-colored face. Snake eyes, Boone. Jake's Colt cleared leather aimed at the man's chest. Give me one reason not to shoot you right now. Snake Eyes held his hands up, visible empty. Because I'm here to tell you the truth and because I'm the only chance you got to reach Crowley alive. He waited. Jake kept the gun level. I watched you in Redemption Creek, Snake Eyes continued. You're faster than Crowley said you'd be, cleaner. Tommy never had a chance. He had the same chance he gave Red. Fair, Snake Eyes nodded. Can I sit long walk to get here? Talk from there. Snake Eyes shrugged, stayed standing. Crowley hired me 6 months ago, promised 500 to help bring justice to a killer. Showed me proof, photographs of burned homesteads, dead families, your name on wanted posters from 3 territories. All lies. I know that now, didn't then. Snake Eyes looked away, jaw working. I'm half Apache, lost family to white men who thought killing Indians was sport. When Crowley showed me those pictures, told me Marshall Brennan's son was just like them, I believed it, wanted to believe it. So you helped kill an innocent animal. We did. The admission came flat, painful. But that's when I knew, standing there watching that old dog just sit there, looking at us, not fighting, not running, just accepting it. That's when I knew Crowley had lied. Snake Eyes met Jake's eyes. I've killed men, in war, in fights, killed them clean or dirty, whatever the situation called for. But I never killed something that trusted humans. Never shot something that couldn't understand why. That dog looked at us like we'd made a mistake. Like surely we didn't mean it, and we shot him anyway. Silence stretched. The fire popped. Why tell me this? Jake asked. Because the other 3, Hack and Doc Kane and Blackjack, they still believe. Crowley's got them holed up at Bitter Springs waiting for you. Told them you'd come like a demon. Told them to kill you on sight. Then that's what I'll do to them first. Kid, you don't understand. Snake Eyes took a careful step closer. This isn't about killing you. Crowley wants you broken. He's been planning this since your father put him in chains. Every step is choreographed. He knew killing the dog would make you chase. Knew you'd kill Tommy. Knew every move before you made it. From inside his shirt, Snake Eyes pulled a small leather journal. Dropped it at Jake's feet. Found this in Crowley's gear. Read it. Then decide if you still want to keep dancing his dance. Jake kept the gun on Snake Eyes while he picked up the journal. Flipped it open one-handed. The pages were filled with neat handwriting. Plans, schedules, predictions. Stage 1, eliminate emotional anchor. The dog represents his last connection to innocence. Once removed, subject will default to violence. Stage 2, feed him targets. Let him kill. Each death will be easier than the last. Each will bring him closer to becoming the weapon I need him to be. Stage 3, reveal the manipulation. Force him to understand he's killed innocence. Break him psychologically. Stage 4, when he's destroyed, kill him. Frame it as self-defense. Destroy the Marshal's legacy completely. End goal, prove that Thomas Brennan's son became the monster I always said he'd be. Revenge isn't just death, it's corruption of everything Brennan stood for. Jake's hands clenched on the journal. The pages crumpled. He's been playing you, Snake Eyes said softly. Playing all of us. Tommy died thinking he was righteous. You killed him thinking you were justified. And somewhere Crowley's laughing because you're both exactly where he wanted you. Jake's voice came out hoarse. What do you want from me? I want to stop him. I want to get to Crowley before he finishes this game. But I can't do it alone. Snake Eyes lowered his hand slowly. I'm offering to ride with you, get you to Bitter Springs, help you pass the other 3 without more killing. Then together we find Crowley, and we end this the right way. Why should I trust you? You helped kill Red. You shouldn't trust me, but I'm the only one who knows Crowley's whole plan, and I owe you a debt I can never repay. Snake Eyes' face hardened. I killed an innocent animal for a lie. I have to live with that. The least I can do is make sure his death wasn't for nothing. Jake studied the man, saw genuine shame in those strange pale eyes, saw the same weight Jake was starting to carry. The burden of knowing you'd been used, made complicit in something evil. He lowered the Colt, didn't holster it. You ride with me, you do exactly what I say. You lie to me once I put a bullet in you. We clear, crystal. And at the end, when we find Crowley, I'm the one who deals with him. Snake Eyes nodded. Wouldn't have it any other way. Jake finally holstered the gun, gestured to the fire. Sit. We ride at dawn. Snake Eyes sat cross-legged across the flames. For a long moment, neither spoke. Just two men carrying different pieces of the same guilt bound together by circumstances they hadn't chosen. There's something else, Snake Eyes said finally. Something Crowley planned for Bitter Springs. He called it the Reckoning. Wouldn't tell us what it was. Just said it would break your heart if you made it that far. Jake's jaw tightened. Only one way to find out. Kid, I've seen a lot of evil. Men who killed for pleasure, for money, for the pure joy of watching things die. But Crowley, Snake Eyes shook his head. He's different. He doesn't just want you dead. He wants you destroyed. Body and soul. Whatever's waiting at Bitter Springs, it'll be designed to break you. Then I'll have to make sure it doesn't. They sat in silence after that. The fire burned low. Stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath them. Jake lay back, pulled his blanket tight. Tomorrow they'd ride toward Bitter Springs, toward 3 more men who believed lies, toward whatever trap Crowley had prepared. His last thought before sleep took him. I've killed 1 man already. How easy will the second be? In Montana, 1952, old Jake opened his eyes. Will sat forward in his chair, caught in the story despite himself. Grandpa, you killed him, just like that. Jake's weathered face was unreadable. Just like that. And that's the part that should scare you, Will. Not that I could do it, that it was easy, that after I slept. Not well, but I slept. Your first kill should haunt you, should make you sick, should make you question everything. Mine did all that, but it also made me ready for the second. And that's when a man starts down a road he can't walk back from. He stood slowly, joints protesting, walked to the window. Outside, snow had started to fall. Tomorrow you leave for war. You'll be asked to kill. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. But if you do remember this, there's a difference between killing because you must and killing because you can. Between justice and revenge. Between duty and corruption. Will's voice was quiet. What happened at Bitter Springs? Jake's reflection in the window glass looked haunted. That's where I learned the difference. That's where Crowley tried to break me. And that's where I had to choose what kind of man I'd be. He turned back to his grandson. But that's for tomorrow night. Right now you need to sleep. Got a long trip ahead of you. Will stood reluctantly, started toward the guest room, stopped at the door. The other 4 men, did you kill them all? Jake's silence was answer enough. When Will had gone, Jake stood alone in the firelight. He walked to the mantel, picked up the daguerreotype, looked at the boy he'd been. 18 years old, standing with holding a rifle, thinking he understood what strength meant. I'm sorry, Red, he whispered to the image, for what I became trying to avenge you, for what it caused. Outside the wind rose. Through the pines, if you listened close, you could almost hear the ghost of a bark, joyful, trusting, waiting, always waiting. The Montana night had deepened. Snow fell heavier now, muffling the world outside the cabin in white silence. Old Jake sat back in his rocking chair, the flask refilled, the fire built up against the cold. Will emerged from the guest room, unable to sleep, drawn back by the unfinished story like a moth to flame. Couldn't rest, could you? Jake said without turning. Will settled into his chair. You said there were 4 more. You said Bitter Springs was where Crowley tried to break you. Jake nodded slowly, took a long pull from the flask. Bitter Springs, old cavalry fort abandoned 10 years by then. Adobe walls thick as a man's arm span, built to hold prisoners being transported to territorial courts. Your great-grandfather showed it to me when I was 10 years old. Taught me how forts fall. From the inside, he said, never from outside. He closed his eyes. The present fell away again. 1885 returned sharp and unforgiving. Snake Eyes and me, we rode hard for 3 days. And every mile I felt Crowley's eyes on us, watching, waiting, knowing exactly where we'd go and what we'd do when we got there. Arizona Territory, 1885. Dawn broke cold over the Badlands, turning the sky the color of a fresh bruise. Jake woke with his hand on his Colt the way he'd slept every night since Red died. Snake Eyes was already up, crouched by a fire barely larger than a candle flame, boiling coffee in a battered tin pot. "Sleep?" Snake Eyes asked. "Some." Jake rolled his blanket, tied it behind his saddle with practiced efficiency. "You told you don't sleep much anymore. Not since." Snake Eyes didn't finish. Didn't need to. They rode north as the sun climbed. The land here was broken country, all arroyos and mesas and stone formations that looked like the bones of giants. Good land for hiding, better land for dying if you didn't know the water sources. Jake did. Ezekiel had taught him every spring, every seep, every trick for finding moisture in country that looked dry as death. They stopped at midday beside a rock tank that held maybe 50 gallons of rainwater. Let the horses drink their fill while the men chewed jerky and hardtack. "How far?" Jake asked. Snake Eyes studied the horizon. "Half day. We'll see the fort by sunset if we push." "The others, tell me about them." Snake Eyes set down his canteen. "Hack Slade, big man, maybe 40. Used to work as an enforcer for mining companies, breaking strikes, scaring workers. Likes hurting people." Crowley offered him money and license to do what he already enjoyed. Doc Kane, Elijah Kane, Army surgeon during the Indian Wars, saw things that broke him. Started drinking to forget, then couldn't stop. Lost his commission, his practice, his family. Crowley found him in a gutter in Tucson, gave him morphine and purpose. Doc's smart when he's sober. Dangerous when he's not. And Blackjack. Clayton Reeves, 29, professional gambler, con man, smooth talker. He's the one Crowley put in charge. Smartest of the bunch, which isn't saying much, but he's a believer. Really thinks we were doing righteous work. Jake absorbed this. 3 more men, 3 more lives twisted by Crowley's poison. You think they can be reasoned with? Doc, maybe, if he's sober enough to listen. Hack, no. He doesn't care about right or wrong, just about getting paid. Blackjack. Snake Eyes paused. He's the wild card. If we can show him proof, he might turn. Might. They rode on. The afternoon heat pressed down like a physical weight. Jake's thoughts drifted to the letter from Abigail Harlan, now ash on a campfire 20 miles back. Tommy had died believing he was righteous. Would these 3 die the same way? Or could Jake find another path? The question gnawed at him. Killing Tommy had been clean in its simplicity. Fast draw, faster bullet, justice served. But clean didn't mean easy. Clean didn't stop Jake from seeing Tommy's surprised eyes every time he closed his own. "You're thinking too much," Snake Eyes said. "I can hear it from here." "How do you know?" "Because I thought the same things after we killed your dog. Wondering if there was another way. If I could have stopped it." Snake Eyes' voice went flat. "There wasn't, and you can't change what's done. Only what comes next." As the sun dropped toward the western peaks, Bitter Springs appeared. The fort squatted on a low rise exactly as Jake remembered from childhood. Adobe walls maybe 12 feet high forming a rough square about 100 yards on each side. Guard towers at 2 corners collapsed now. The main gate hung crooked on leather hinges. Through field glasses, Jake could see movement inside. They dismounted a mile out behind a ridge that offered concealment, crawled to the crest on their bellies. Snake Eyes pulled out a battered spyglass, glassed the fort with professional thoroughness. 3 men inside, like I said, Hack, Doc, and Blackjack. He shifted the glass. But there's more. 6 others. Hired guns on the walls. Jake's stomach dropped. Crowley brought reinforcements. Looks like professionals too by how they're positioned. Overlapping fields of fire. Someone who knows tactics set this up. Crowley. Probably. Snake Eyes handed Jake the spyglass. "Look at the courtyard. Center." Jake looked. His blood went cold. In the middle of the fort's parade ground sat a covered wagon. The tarp over it was lashed tight, but the shape underneath was unmistakable. Large wooden crates, maybe a dozen of them. "What is that?" Jake asked, though part of him already knew. "I was hoping you'd tell me." Snake Eyes' face was grim. "But if I had to guess, dynamite. Crowley's got the fort rigged to blow." Jake's mind raced. 9 men inside. 3 he'd come for, 6 protecting them. If the fort was rigged with explosives, a direct assault was suicide. Even if he survived the guns, Crowley could blow the whole thing sky high with everyone inside. It's a trap, Jake said. Crowley knew we'd come, knew we'd scout it first. This whole thing is designed to funnel us into a killing box. So what do? Jake studied the fort through the glass, remembered his father's lessons, how forts fell from inside, the drainage system that carried waste out through the north wall, the weak point every fort had if you knew where to look. We don't storm it, Jake said slowly. We infiltrate, get inside quiet, disable the explosives first, then deal with the men. That's suicide too. Maybe, but it's better odds than a frontal assault. Jake lowered the glass, looked at Snake Eyes. I'm going in alone. You create a diversion, stampede their horses, make noise on the south side. Draw the guns away from the north wall. I'll use the old drainage tunnel, come up through the basement. You'll be trapped inside with 9 men. 6 men. You'll take at least 3 with the diversion. Snake Eyes was quiet for a long moment. Then you trust me that much to not just ride away once you're inside? Jake met his eyes. No, but I trust that you want Crowley dead as much as I do. And the only way we get to him is through this. A slow smile crossed Snake Eyes' face. You got your father's sand, kid. All right, I'll give you 1 hour after sunset. That enough time to get in position? It'll have to be. They spent the remaining daylight hours preparing. Snake Eyes gathered dry brush and tinder materials that would burn hot and fast. Jake checked his weapons. Winchester fully loaded, Colt cleaned and ready, knife sharp enough to shave with. He stripped off anything that would make noise, left his spurs, his canteen, anything metal that might clink. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, Snake Eyes gripped Jake's shoulder. You know this is crazy. I know. You know you might die in there. I know that too. Then why? Jake thought about Red, about Tommy's surprised eyes, about Abigail's letter and the weight of killing a man who'd believed he was righteous, about Crowley's journal and the choreographed dance they were all performing. Because if I don't, Crowley wins. He gets to corrupt my father's legacy, gets to turn me into the monster he says I am. And Red's death means nothing. Jake's jaw set. I'd rather die trying than live knowing I became what he wanted. Snake Eyes nodded, understood. 1 hour, then I start the show. They separated. Snake Eyes circled south with the horses. Jake moved north low and silent, using every scrap of cover the broken land offered. The moon rose thin and pale, giving just enough light to see by. The north wall loomed before him. Jake found the drainage outlet exactly where memory said it would be. A stone pipe maybe 3 feet across set low in the wall to carry wastewater out during the rainy season. Dry now, dark as a grave. Jake looked back once, saw nothing but empty desert. Snake Eyes was out there somewhere preparing. No turning back now. He crawled into the pipe. The tunnel was tight. Jake had to pull himself forward on his elbows, pushing with his toes. The Winchester dragged behind him. The stone walls pressed close. The air smelled of old rot and rat droppings. 50 yards of claustrophobic darkness every foot earned, with skinned elbows and scraped knees. Then the tunnel opened into a basement chamber. The old fort's cistern room where rainwater had been collected and stored. Empty now except for debris and bones. Small animal skeletons, probably pack rats. The faint glow of moonlight came through cracks in the ceiling above. Jake stood, stretched, muscles cramped from the crawl. Drew his Colt, moved to the wooden stairs that led up to the main level. Outside he heard voices, boots on packed earth, the hired guns making their rounds. Jake froze, ear to the door at the top of the stairs. Think the kid'll actually show, one voice asked. Crowley says he will. Says the boy's predictable. Killed Tommy just like he thought he would. Still seems like a lot of fuss over one trapper. 9 of us for one kid. Crowley's paying. I don't ask questions, long as the gold's good. The voices moved away. Jake eased the door open a crack, peered through. The fort's interior courtyard lay before him. The covered wagon sat in the center, maybe 30 yards away. Guards on the walls, silhouettes against the stars. Lights in what used to be the officers' quarters on the far side. Jake checked his mental clock. 40 minutes since he'd left Snake Eyes. 20 minutes until the diversion. He slipped from the basement, stayed low, moved along the inner wall using shadows for cover. Reached the wagon, pulled back a corner of the tarp. Wooden crates stamped with army markings. Danger. Explosives. Handle with care. Jake counted 12 crates. Each one held maybe 20 sticks of dynamite, enough to turn the fort into a crater. And there, coiled on top of the crates, was the fuse. Black powder cord leading to a mechanical timer, the kind with clockwork gears and a spring mechanism. Jake had seen them used for mining operations. Set the timer when the spring walk away. When the spring unwound, it struck a primer that ignited the fuse. His hands moved to the timer, examined it in the moonlight. The spring was already wound. The timer set for, he couldn't tell. Could be minutes. Could be hours. A noise behind him. Jake spun Colt coming up. 3 men stood in the courtyard. They'd come from the officers' quarters, silent as ghosts. The center one was massive, maybe 6.5 feet tall, shoulders like a bull. Hack Slade. To his left, a thin man in a stained suit coat, hands trembling, even from 30 feet away. Doc Kane. On the right, a younger man in a gambler's vest, eyes sharp and calculating. Clayton Blackjack Reeves. Well, Blackjack said. His voice was smooth, educated. Crowley said you'd come, said you'd try the drainage tunnel. Man knows his business. Jake kept the Colt steady, aimed at Blackjack's chest. The fort's rigged to blow. You know that. We know. Blackjack smiled. Question is, do you know when? Before Jake could answer, the timer on the wagon began to tick. Loud, mechanical, the sound of gears engaging. 15 minutes, the numbers appeared on the face of the timer, glowing faintly. Phosphorescent paint, counting down. 14 minutes, 45 seconds. Crowley's insurance policy, Blackjack continued, in case we failed to kill you conventional ways. At least this way we all go together. Democratic when you think about it. Jake's mind raced. 15 minutes to disarm a bomb he didn't fully understand, while 3 armed men watched, while 6 more patrolled the walls above. Math that didn't favor survival. You're insane, Jake said. You'll die too. Hack laughed, a sound like rocks grinding. We all die sometime, boy. Might as well get paid for it. Doc, Jake said, looking at the trembling man. You're a surgeon. You understand explosives. Doc Kane's eyes were glassy pupils like pinholes. Morphine, probably. But somewhere behind the chemical haze, intelligence flickered. I understand we're all dead if you don't put that gun down and help me cut these fuses. He's lying, Blackjack said. Trying to trick you. Crowley warned us you'd try to divide us. Crowley's using you, Jake's voice rose. All of you. You think he cares if you live or die, you're pawns. Expendable. The fort blows, he blames it on me, and you're just collateral damage. 14 minutes, Hack's hand dropped to his gun. Enough talk. Then the night exploded. South wall erupted in flame and noise. Snake Eyes diversion. The dry brush he'd piled, catching fire all at once, creating a wall of light and heat. Horses screaming. The 6 hired guns shouting, running toward the blaze. Jake moved. He dove behind the wagon as Hack drew and fired. The bullet smashed into a crate of dynamite. Didn't detonate, thank God, but splintered wood showered Jake's back. He rolled, came up firing. His shot took Hack in the right knee. The big man roared, went down like a felled tree. Doc Kane scrambled for cover, hands up, unarmed. Don't shoot, I'm not fighting. Blackjack was faster. His pistol cleared leather, smooth fired twice. 1 round grazed Jake's upper arm, tearing cloth and skin. The other missed by inches. Jake returned fire. Blackjack dove behind a water trough. 13 minutes. Gunfire erupted from the walls. The hired guns had spotted the diversion for what it was, were turning their attention inward. Bullets kicked up dust around the wagon. Jake pressed himself flat against the crates, breathing hard. His arm burned where the bullet had grazed it. Not serious, but bleeding. He needed to move. Needed to either defuse this bomb or get clear before it turned them all into red mist. Doc, Jake shouted over the chaos. How do we stop the timer? Doc Kane crouched behind a pile of supply crates, called back, you can't, it's mechanical. Once it's set, it runs until the spring unwinds. Then we cut the fuses. There are 12 crates, 12 sets of fuses, you'd need to cut all of them. 12 minutes, more gunfire. One of the hired guns appeared at the ladder leading down from the north wall. Jake shot him. Clean hit to the chest. The man fell backward, disappeared over the wall's edge with a scream that cut off sudden. 2 down, 8 to go. Hack was crawling toward his dropped pistol leg, dragging useless behind him. Blood left a dark trail in the dust. His face was twisted with pain and rage. Jake could shoot him, should shoot him, but something in Abigail's letter stopped his finger on the trigger. They're fools, not monsters. "Stay down," Jake shouted at Hack. "Stay down and you live." Hack's response was a string of curses. He reached his gun, rolled, fired wild. The shot went high. Jake fired back not to kill, but to disarm. The bullet hit Hack's gun hand. Bones shattered. The pistol flew away. Hack collapsed screaming. 11 minutes. Blackjack rose from behind the trough, both guns blazing now. He'd drawn a second pistol from a shoulder holster. Professional gunman tactics. Jake felt a round tug his vest, another burn across his ribs. He returned fire, drove Blackjack back to cover. The hired guns were regrouping. 3 of them descended ladders on the east and west sides, moving to flank. Jake was pinned, out of position, low on ammunition. Then Snake Eyes appeared on the south wall, rifle in hand. He fired 3 times fast and accurate. 2 hired guns fell. The third dove for cover. 5 down, 4 to go. Snake Eyes vaulted the wall, landed in a crouch, kept firing. Professional shooter. Every round found a target or drove someone to cover. He sprinted across the courtyard, slid behind the wagon next to Jake. "You started without me." "Timer's running, 12 crates, can't stop it." Snake Eyes looked at the glowing numbers. 10 minutes, 30 seconds. His face went pale. "Then we cut the fuses and get the hell out." "How, together? You cover, I cut. Then we run." 9 minutes. Doc Kane, still crouched behind his crates, shouted, "The fuses all run through a central point. Under the wagon, cut there, and you sever them all at once." "Why are you helping us?" Jake yelled back. "Because I'm a doctor, damn it. I took an oath, and I'm tired of men dying for Crowley's hate." Blackjack heard this. Rage twisted his features. "Traitor, we trusted you." He fired at Doc. The bullet caught the old surgeon in the shoulder, spun him around. Doc went down hard. Jake felt something snap inside him. Not rage, something colder, clearer. He stood, stepped from cover, Colt extended. Fired 4 times. Methodical, deliberate, every shot aimed with the precision Ezekiel had drilled into him across 1,000 practice sessions. 2 rounds hit Blackjack's center mass. The gambler's vest, probably lined with a steel plate, stopped the first. The second punched through at an angle, found meat. Blackjack staggered. The last 2 rounds took out hired guns emerging from the officers' quarters. Headshots. Clinical. Final. 7 down, 2 to go, 8 minutes. Snake Eyes was already under the wagon, knife out, sawing at the bundled fuses where they converged. "There's too many. The cord's too thick." Jake dropped beside him, drew his own knife. Together they cut the razor-sharp blades, biting through black powder cord. Each severed fuse sparked fizz, died. Above them, the last 2 hired guns fired down. Bullets punched through the wagon bed. 1 round grazed Snake Eyes' leg. He grunted, kept cutting. 7 minutes. The fuses parted. 12 separate cords, all severed. The spark traveling toward the detonators died in each one. But the timer kept ticking. "There's more," Snake Eyes hissed. He pointed. A 13th fuse hidden, running from the timer directly to a crate in the wagon's center. Backup detonator. Crowley's final insurance. 6 minutes. Jake reached for it. His fingers closed on the cord. Started to cut. An explosion rocked the fort. Not dynamite. Not yet. One of the hired guns had thrown a stick at them, lit and smoking. The dynamite landed 10 feet from the wagon. Jake and Snake Eyes had maybe 2 seconds. They rolled clear. The explosion tore a crater in the courtyard, threw debris high. The wagon lurched, tilted. 1 wheel shattered. Crates shifted. The timer, still ticking, now sat at a 45-degree angle. 5 minutes. Jake's ears rang. Blood ran from his nose. He'd caught shrapnel somewhere, couldn't tell where. Everything hurt. Snake Eyes dragged himself upright, rifle lost, drawing a pistol with his good hand. The last 2 hired guns descended from the walls, sensing victory. Jake and Snake Eyes were exposed, wounded, running out of time and ammunition. Then Blackjack appeared. The gambler, gut-shot and dying, raised his pistol with shaking hands, aimed at Jake. Thumb on the hammer. "Crowley was right about you," Blackjack whispered. Blood bubbled at his lips. "You are a killer." Jake met his eyes, saw the belief there. The faith in Crowley's lies, even now, even dying. Saw himself reflected in Blackjack's fading gaze. Young, hard, standing over bodies with a gun in his hand. Maybe Crowley was right. 4 minutes. "I'm sorry," Jake said, meant it. "You deserve better than his lies." Blackjack's finger tightened on the trigger. Jake prepared to draw, knowing he wouldn't be fast enough, not wounded, not from the ground. A shot cracked out, but not from Blackjack. The gambler jerked forward, eyes going wide. A red flower bloomed on his back. He fell face first in the dust. Behind where he'd stood, Doc Kane lowered a smoking pistol, his wounded shoulder dark with blood. "Told you," Doc said, voice faint. "I took an oath. First, do no harm." He smiled weakly. "Second, stop the harm others do." Then he collapsed. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. The last two hired guns, seeing their employer dead and the fort descending into chaos, made a choice. They ran, sprinted for the gate. Mounted horses rode hard into the darkness. Jake let them go. No point in more killing. 3 minutes. He and Snake Eyes crawled back to the wagon. The 13th fuse was there, still intact spark crawling toward the central detonator. Jake's knife was gone, lost in the explosion. Snake Eyes handed him a small folding blade. Jake sawed at the fuse. The cord was reinforced. Woven with wire, Crowley's final trick. The blade bit into it slowly, too slowly. 2 minutes. "Cut faster." "I'm trying." The wire parted. 1 strand, 2. The fuse was 3-ply, each layer wrapped around the others. Jake's hands were slippery with blood. The knife slip cut his palm. He gripped harder, ignored the pain. 1 minute, 30 seconds. 3rd ply parted. The fuse separated. The spark died 3 inches from the detonator. Jake and Snake Eyes lay in the dust, breathing hard. Around them, the fort was a wreck. Bodies, blood, smoke from the earlier diversion fire still rising. "We did it," Snake Eyes said. Sounded surprised. "We did it," Jake agreed. Then he heard the click. A gun hammer cocking. Behind them, Jake rolled, hand-dropping to his Colt. Found the holster empty. Lost somewhere in the chaos. Hack Slade, both legs useless, one hand shattered, had dragged himself across the courtyard. Blood trail behind him like a slug's. In his good hand, a Derringer. Small caliber, but lethal at this range. Aimed at Jake's head. "Should have killed me when you had the chance." "Boy," Hack wheezed. Pain and hate filled his eyes. "Now I finish what Crowley started." His finger began to squeeze. A rifle shot cracked from the wall. Hack's head snapped back. The Derringer fell from nerveless fingers. He slumped sideways dead before he hit the ground. Jake looked up. Doc Kane sat propped against the wall, having dragged himself up the ladder somehow. A rifle that wasn't his rested across his lap barrel, smoking. As Jake watched, the old surgeon's eyes closed. His chest rose once, twice, went still. "Doc," Jake scrambled to his feet, ran to the wall. Snake Eyes limped after him. They reached the surgeon together. Jake pressed fingers to Doc's throat, found a pulse. Weak, thready. The shoulder wound had bled badly. Shock was setting in. "We need to get him help," Jake said. "Nearest town's a day's ride. He won't make it." "Then we make it closer." Jake looked around the destroyed fort, found a door that would work as a stretcher. He and Snake Eyes fashioned a litter, got Doc secured on it. As they worked, Snake Eyes said quietly, "You know we just killed 5 men." "I know." "You know Crowley planned this. Wanted us to kill them or die trying. Either way, he wins." Jake looked at the bodies scattered across the courtyard. Hack massive even in death. Blackjack faith in Crowley's lies bleeding out with his life. The hired guns just men doing a job, choosing the wrong employer. And Tommy back in Redemption Creek, first of the dead. "No," Jake said, "he doesn't win, because we're still alive, and we know the truth now." "What truth?" "That he's not a mastermind. He's not pulling strings we can't see. He's just a man who hates my father. And hate makes you predictable." Jake's jaw set. "We're done playing his game. Time to take the fight to him." They carried Doc out of Bitter Springs as the moon climbed higher. Behind them, the fort sat silent, a tomb for 5 more pieces in Crowley's game. The dynamite sat inert in the tilted wagon timer, run out no longer ticking. 3 miles from the fort, they found a shepherd's cabin. Abandoned, but it had a roof and walls. They got Doc inside, built a fire, did what they could for his wounds. The shoulder needed real surgery, but Jake cleaned it, packed it with moss, the way Ezekiel had taught him, bound it tight. Doc woke once near midnight. His eyes found Jake in the firelight. "You saved me, why, because you helped us. Because you chose truth over lies." Jake wet a cloth, dabbed it against Doc's cracked lips. "And because I'm tired of men dying for Crowley's hate. The others? Dead, except Blackjack, and he died believing Crowley's lies. But you saw through it. That took courage." Doc smiled faintly. "Or morphine withdrawal. Hard to tell." His eyes closed again. "Thank you, son. Your father would be proud." Jake sat back, stared at the fire, wondered if that was true. If his father, Marshal Thomas Brennan, would be proud of a son who'd killed 5 men in as many days. If pride was even possible for what Jake had become. Snake Eyes sat across the fire, cleaning and reloading his weapons. "So what now? We know Crowley's endgame. He wants you broken or dead, preferably both. Where does that leave us?" "I don't know, but I know where he is. Wherever the next trap is, waiting, watching, pulling triggers from the shadows." Jake looked at Snake Eyes. "You said there was a 5th man, someone we haven't accounted for." Snake Eyes nodded slowly. "Yeah, 5th set of boot prints at your camp. But he wasn't at Bitter Springs. I don't know who he is or where he went." "Then we find him. Find him, we find Crowley." "How?" Jake pulled out Crowley's journal, the one Snake Eyes had taken from the outlaw's gear. Flipped through pages by firelight. Read passages aloud. "Stage 4, when he's destroyed, kill him. Frame it as self-defense. But first he must understand the depth of my revenge. Must see the full picture. Must know that every step was choreographed." "That's not new information." "No, but listen to this." Jake turned pages. Found an entry dated 3 weeks earlier. "E.S. Jr. is the key, the final knife. When the boy sees him, understands what I have done, that's when his heart breaks completely. That's when he becomes mine." "E.S. Jr.," Snake Eyes repeated. "Who's that?" Jake's blood went cold. His hand started to shake. "Ezekiel Stone Jr., my mentor's son." "You said your mentor died 3 years ago." "He did, peacefully, old age. And his son," Jake's voice trailed off. Memory surfaced sharp and painful. "Ezekiel had a son, younger than me, maybe 12 when I left to live on my own. His name was Ethan." "Where is he now?" "I don't know. Last I heard, he'd gone east. His mother's family lived in St. Louis. After Ezekiel died, I figured Ethan went there. I never followed up. Never checked." Snake Eyes' face was grim. "And now Crowley has him. Or has convinced him of something. The same lies he fed the others." Jake stood paced. "Ezekiel was like a father to me. Raised me when my own father couldn't. Taught me everything. Hunting, tracking, survival. How to read land and sign and men's hearts. And his son, Ethan, looked up to me. Followed me everywhere. Called me brother." "What's Crowley's angle?" Jake's mind raced, putting pieces together. "Ezekiel died in his sleep. Natural causes. But what if Crowley told Ethan it wasn't natural? What if he convinced him I had something to do with it, that I killed Ezekiel to steal his legacy? Would the kid believe that? I don't know. I left right after the burial. Didn't say goodbye proper. Just left. A 12-year-old boy watching his mentor walk away without explanation. 3 years of silence. 3 years for resentment to grow, for questions to fester, for Crowley to plant his poison." Snake Eyes swore quietly. Where would Crowley take him? Jake turned more pages, found a map sketched in the journal's back, a rough drawing of Arizona territory. X marks in various locations. One of them circled in red ink sat near the Mexican border. A single word written beside it, Diablo. Diablo Canyon, Jake said. Old mining town, mostly abandoned now. lawless, perfect place for Crowley to set his final trap. How far? 4 days hard ride, maybe 5 with Doc. Doc can't travel, not yet. Jake looked at the sleeping surgeon. The man had saved his life twice now, once by telling them how to disable the bomb, once by shooting Hack. Leaving him felt like abandonment. But staying meant giving Crowley more time to poison Ethan, more time to prepare whatever hell waited at Diablo Canyon. We leave him supplies, Jake decided, food, water, bandages, and we ride fast, get to Diablo before Crowley can finish whatever he's planning. You know it's a trap. I know. You know Crowley wants you to come, that everything so far has been designed to bring you to this exact point. I know that too. Snake Eyes studied him across the fire. And you're going anyway. I am. Why, you could ride away, head to California, Oregon, anywhere. Start over. Crowley would eventually give up. Jake thought about that, really considered it. He could run, disappear into the territories, become someone else, let Crowley's revenge die unfulfilled. But then he thought about Red, about Tommy dying with faith in lies, about Blackjack's last words, about Doc Kane choosing truth even when it cost him everything, about all the people Crowley had twisted and broken in service of his hate. And he thought about Ethan, a kid who'd lost his father and his brother in the space of a year, who'd probably spent 3 years wondering why Jake abandoned him, who was now in the hands of a man who'd turned that pain into poison. Because if I run, Crowley wins, not just against me, but against everyone, against my father's memory, against the idea that right matters, that truth matters. Jake's voice hardened, and because Ethan deserves better than to die believing Crowley's lies. Snake Eyes nodded, stood, extended his hand. Then we ride, and whatever happens in Diablo Canyon, we face it together. Jake gripped the hand, felt the calluses, the scars. The hand of a man who'd chosen wrong, realized it, and was trying to make it right. They were alike in that way, both carrying weight, both trying to find redemption in a world that didn't offer much. They left at first light. Doc woke long enough for Jake to explain. The surgeon nodded, understanding. Go, finish this. I'll be here when you get back. You'll live, Doc smiled weakly. I'm harder to kill than I look. Besides, I've got morphine and willpower. One of them will get me through. Jake left him the medical supplies, most of their food, one of the rifles. Someone will come through eventually. Shepherds use this cabin. Tell them what happened. Tell them to send word to the marshal in Tucson. What should I tell them about you? Jake paused at the door. Tell them Jake Brennan is finishing his father's work. The ride to Diablo Canyon took 3 days of hard travel. They pushed the horses to their limits, spelled them when they could trade it for fresh mounts at a way station run by a Navajo woman who asked no questions and offered less conversation. On the second night, camped beside a dry wash, Snake Eyes broke a long silence. Tell me about your father. The real story, not Crowley's version. Jake poked the fire, watched sparks rise. He was a hard man, fair but hard, believed the law was bigger than any one person, bigger than family even. I was 9 when he arrested Crowley, 10 when I watched him testify in court. The things Crowley did, Jake's voice tightened. He massacred an Apache village. Women, children, elders took their scalps to prove he'd killed renegade warriors, collected bounty, then stole army gold during the chaos. Your father caught him, tracked him for 3 months, brought him back in irons. Crowley swore revenge. 3 years later, his gang attacked our ranch. Father held them off long enough for me and Red to escape. Died doing it. And you've been running ever since. Not running, surviving. There's a difference. Snake Eyes was quiet a moment. What about your mother? Dead when I was 7. Fever. Father threw himself into the law after that. Wore the badge like armor. Like if he was Marshall Brennan instead of Thomas Brennan, the hurt would stay outside. Jake's jaw worked. I did the same thing. Became the trapper, the hunter, anything but Jake Brennan, the kid whose parents died. Until they killed your dog. Until that. They rode into Diablo Canyon at dusk on the 3rd day. The town clung to life in a narrow valley, buildings scattered along a creek that still held water half the year. It had been a silver mining town, once boomed for 5 years, then busted when the ore played out. Now maybe 50 people called it home. Prospectors, outlaws, people who had nowhere else to go. The main street was dirt-rutted with wagon tracks. Buildings leaned against each other like drunks. At the north end, a cantina with a hand-painted sign, La Rosa Roja. At the south end, a church with a collapsed roof. In between, survival. They left the horses at a livery run by a Mexican boy who eyed their weapons nervously, paid him double to keep quiet. Then they walked the street as the last light faded. Jake felt eyes on them, windows and doorways hiding watchers. His hand stayed near his Colt. Snake Eyes carried his rifle loose and ready. The cantina door stood open. Music drifted out, scratchy and thin, a guitar missing strings. Jake pushed through. Inside was exactly what he expected. Rough tables, rougher men, a few women working the room with tired smiles. The bartender, an old Mexican with knife scars on his face, wiped glasses and pretended not to notice newcomers. And there at a table in the back sat a young man, maybe 15 now, though he'd been 12 when Jake last saw him. Taller, harder, but still recognizably Ezekiel Stone's son. Ethan. The boy was cleaning a pistol, movements practiced and methodical. He looked up as Jake approached. Their eyes met. Recognition flared. Then something colder. "Hello, Ethan," Jake said quietly. "Jake." Ethan's voice had deepened, no longer a child's voice. "Took you long enough? We need to talk." "Talk?" Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You disappear for 3 years. Don't write, don't visit, don't even send word you're alive. Then you show up and want to talk. I know I owe you explanations. You owe me a lot more than that." Ethan stood. The pistol stayed in his hand, pointed down but ready. "You owe me answers. About why you left. About what happened to my father. About all of it." Jake's heart sank. Crowley had gotten to him, poisoned him the same way he'd poisoned the others. "Your father died peacefully, Ethan. Old age, you know that. You were there." "Was I?" Ethan's eyes were hard. "Or was I a kid who believed what he was told, who believed his hero, when Jake Brennan said everything was fine?" "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the truth. The real truth. The one you hid." Ethan's voice rose. Other patrons looked over. "A man came to me 6 months ago, told me things, showed me evidence, made me understand what really happened." "Crowley. Reverend Crowley, yeah, he told me you killed my father. Poisoned him slow so it looked natural. Stole his knowledge, his territory, his legacy, then abandoned me because I was a witness." Jake's stomach twisted. The lie was perfect, tailored exactly to Ethan's pain, to the questions a 12-year-old would have after watching his mentor die and his hero disappear. "That's not true, Ethan, none of it." "Prove it." "I can't prove a negative, but think, you knew your father, you knew me. Would Ezekiel have trusted a killer? Would he have taught me everything if he thought I'd murdered him? Maybe he didn't know what you were. Maybe you fooled him too." Snake Eyes stepped forward. "Kid, I've ridden with Jake, seen him spare men who tried to kill him, seen him risk his life to save people he didn't even know. He's not a killer." "Who are you?" "Someone who believed Crowley's lies too, until I saw through them." Ethan's gun came up, not quite aimed but ready. "That's convenient. Another convert to Jake's righteousness. Except I've got proof you don't." "What proof?" "This." Ethan pulled a leather journal from his coat, threw it on the table. "My father's journal, his last entries. Read it and tell me Jake's innocent." Jake picked up the journal, recognized Ezekiel's handwriting immediately. Turned to the last pages dated 3 years ago, just before the old man's death. The words hit him like bullets. "Jake's changing. Can see it in his eyes. The hunger. The way he watches me when he thinks I'm sleeping. He wants what I know, wants my territory, my reputation, beginning to fear he'll take it by force. Starting to feel weak, dizzy spells, stomach pains. Jake makes my coffee now, always insists. Won't let Ethan or me prepare our own food anymore. Says he's helping. But I wonder. Told Ethan that if anything happens to me, trust Jake. But I lied. If I die, Ethan must run. Get away from Jake. The boy I raised is gone. Something else wears his face now." Jake's hands shook. He looked up at Ethan, saw the pain there, the betrayal, the belief. This isn't real, Jake said. This isn't your father's writing. It's his journal, his hand. I know my father's writing. The journal's real. The entries are forged. Jake turned to Snake Eyes. Crowley's good. I'll give him that. This is masterwork forgery. You would say that, Ethan spat. Murderer. I loved your father like he was my own. He saved my life, raised me when I had nothing. I would never. Then why did you leave? Ethan's voice cracked, raw emotion breaking through the anger. Why did you disappear the day after his funeral? Why 3 years of silence if you cared so much? And there it was, the real question. The one Jake had been avoiding for 3 years. Because I couldn't stay, Jake said quietly. Because every time I looked at you, I saw him. Because I was 18 years old and broken and didn't know how to be there for a 12-year-old kid when I could barely be there for myself. That's not good enough. I know, I'm sorry, Ethan. I failed you, but I didn't kill your father. And I'm here now because Crowley's using you the same way he used 5 other men, to hurt me, to destroy what your father built. Liar. The cantina door opened. A man walked in, tall, thin, white hair, black coat, eyes like winter ice. Silas Vance Crowley. He crossed the room slowly, deliberately. Every eye followed him. He stopped beside Ethan, placed a fatherly hand on the boy's shoulder. Jacob Brennan, Crowley said. His voice was cultured, calm, the voice of a teacher, a preacher, a man who knew truth. Right on schedule. Jake's hand dropped to his colt. Snake Eyes' rifle came up. Crowley smiled. Now, we're all civilized men here. No need for violence. Not yet. You killed my dog, murdered 5 men. Tried to blow up a fort. I'd say violence is already here. 5 men. Crowley's eyebrows rose. Surely you mean you killed 5 men. I simply provided information. Motivation. You pulled the triggers. You lied to them. Manipulated them. Did I? Or did I simply show them truth they were ready to believe? Tommy Harlan wanted money. Hack Slade wanted violence. Doc Kane wanted purpose. Blackjack wanted righteousness. And young Ethan, Crowley squeezed the boy's shoulder. He wanted answers about why his hero abandoned him. I gave them all what they wanted. Not my fault it led to death. Jake felt the trap closing, saw it clearly now. Every word Crowley spoke was designed to be repeated, to be witnessed, to build a narrative where Jake was the villain. What do you want, Crowley? Want I've already won, boy. You've become exactly what I said you were, a killer. Your father spent his life upholding law. You've spent the last week breaking it, shooting men in saloons, attacking forts, leaving bodies in your wake. Crowley's smile widened. And now you stand here, guns drawn, threatening an old man and a boy. Everything I told them about you was true. They just had the timeline wrong. This ends now, Jake said. You're coming with me, standing trial for murder, conspiracy, theft. Am I? What proof do you have? The word of Snake Eyes Boone, a known outlaw. A journal I supposedly wrote, which any lawyer will prove is hearsay. You've got nothing but corpses and a reputation for violence. Crowley was right. Jake knew it. The old man had insulated himself perfectly. Every crime committed by proxy, every death someone else's hand on the trigger. Legally, Crowley was clean, but there was another kind of justice. Jake's father had believed in law, in courts and evidence and proper procedure, but his father was dead killed by Crowley's gang while following those rules. Maybe it was time for a different kind of reckoning. Jake's colt cleared leather. In Montana, 1952, old Jake opened his eyes. The fire had burned down to embers. Will sat forward, hands gripping his chair. Did you kill him? Will asked. Right there in the cantina. Jake was quiet for a long moment. That's what Crowley wanted, what he'd planned for. Me shooting him in front of witnesses, proving I was the monster, destroying my father's legacy completely. But I remembered something Ezekiel taught me. He said the hardest thing a man can do isn't pulling a trigger. It's not pulling it when everything in you wants to. That's when you find out who you really are. Jake stood, walked to the window. Snow still falling, silent, pure. Tomorrow night I'll tell you what happened in that cantina, how it all ended, but for now you need to sleep. Big day tomorrow. Will stood reluctantly. Grandpa, one question. What's that? Ethan, did he make it out? Jake's reflection in the window glass looked haunted. That's part of tomorrow's story too. Sleep now, Will. War's waiting on the other side of tomorrow. You'll need your strength. After Will had gone, Jake stood alone in the darkness. He thought about Diablo Canyon, about Crowley's smile, about Ethan's betrayed eyes, about the choice he'd made in that moment when the Colt was in his hand and revenge was a trigger pull away. Outside, the wind carried snow through the pines. Somewhere in the darkness, if you listened close, you could almost hear voices. The dead perhaps, or memory, or both. Jake touched the window glass. Cold, real, present. Almost done, Red, he whispered. Almost told it all. Then maybe I can rest. The snow fell heavier. The fire died. And in the silence, Montana waited for dawn. Montana, September 1952. The final night before Will Brennan left for war. Snow had stopped falling, leaving the world wrapped in white silence. Inside the cabin, the fire burned bright again, rebuilt for the telling of the final chapter. Will sat in his chair, uniform pressed and ready for tomorrow's departure. But his mind was in 1885 in a cantina in Diablo Canyon where his grandfather stood with a gun drawn on the man who'd orchestrated everything. Jake poured whiskey into both their glasses. His hands were steady now, the way they'd been steady that day 67 years ago, when everything came to a head. You asked if I killed Crowley in that cantina, Jake said. The answer's more complicated than yes or no, because what happened next, that's when I learned the difference between justice and revenge. That's when I found out what kind of man I really was. He settled into his chair, closed his eyes, let 1885 rise up one more time. It started with a gun in my hand and a choice I couldn't take back. Diablo Canyon, 1885. The cantina held its breath. Every eye on Jake Brennan, 18 years old, Colt leveled at Silas Vance Crowley's chest. Snake Eyes Boone stood beside him, rifle ready. Ethan Stone stood frozen torn between the boy he'd been and the weapon Crowley had shaped him into. Crowley smiled. That same smile he'd worn in court 9 years ago. The smile of a man who'd already won, who was just waiting for everyone else to realize it. Go ahead, boy, Crowley said softly. Pull that trigger. Prove everything I've said about you. Show young Ethan what you really are. Jake's finger tightened on the trigger. The Colt was cocked, hammer back 1 ounce of pressure from sending Crowley to hell. Every cell in Jake's body screamed for it, for the release, for the ending. But he heard his father's voice, heard it clear as if Marshal Thomas Brennan stood beside him in that smoky cantina. Badge is a burdened son, means doing right even when it costs everything. Jake's hand trembled, not with fear, with the effort of not firing. You killed my father, Jake said. His voice was steady despite the tremor in his hand. Your gang attacked our ranch, shot him down. I watched him die. Did you? Crowley tilted his head. Or did you watch something else, something you've been lying to yourself about for 6 years? I know what I saw. Do you? Let me tell you what really happened that night. Let me tell you the truth you've been running from all this time. Jake wanted to shoot, wanted to end the words before they could land. But something in Crowley's tone stopped him. That certainty, that knowledge. Your father's ranch was attacked, yes, Crowley continued. My men were there. But who fired the first shot, Jacob, who started the gunfight that killed Marshal Thomas Brennan? Your men. No. Crowley's smile widened. You did. The world tilted. Jake felt the floor shift under his feet. You were 12 years old, scared. Your father had taught you to shoot. Taught you well. When armed men appeared in your yard, you grabbed his rifle. Remember, you grabbed the Winchester from above the fireplace. Jake did remember. The memory he'd buried deep. The night that lived in his nightmares. Your father told you to stay inside, but you were brave. Foolish and brave. You came to the window, saw men in the yard, thought you were helping, thought you were protecting your home. No. You fired first, Jacob, through the window, meant to hit one of my men. Missed. The bullet went wild, hit your father in the back as he stood on the porch. That's a lie. But Jake's voice cracked, because somewhere in the buried places of his memory he saw it. The muzzle flash, his father spinning. blood. My men returned fire then, in the chaos, in the dark. But your father was already dying, already bleeding out from the .44 caliber round that came from inside his own house. Crowley leaned forward. You killed him, boy. You've been running from it ever since. That's why you couldn't stay with Ethan. Why you disappeared into the wilderness. Why you became the ghost instead of the man. Because deep down you knew. Jake's gun hand dropped. The Colt pointed at the floor. His whole body felt numb. Snake Eyes stepped closer. He's lying, Jake. He's trying to break you. Don't listen. Am I lying? Crowley pulled a folded paper from his coat. This is the coroner's report from that night. Took some finding, but I'm a patient man. Read it, see what it says about the angle of entry, about the caliber, about the powder burns that suggested close range from behind. He tossed the paper on the table. Jake stared at it like it was a snake. I didn't. Jake's voice was barely a whisper. I was trying to help. Of course you were. You were a child, a terrified child trying to save his father. And you killed him instead. Crowley's voice gentled, became almost kind, almost paternal. That's the real reason I brought you here, Jacob. Not to kill you, to free you, to make you understand that you and I were the same. We're both guilty, both carrying weight that won't lift. The only difference is I've accepted what I am. You're still pretending. Ethan made a sound, as sober a gasp. Jake couldn't tell. Couldn't look at the boy. Couldn't look at anything but the floor. So here's my offer, Crowley said. Put down the gun, walk away, live with the truth the way I've lived with mine. Or pull the trigger, kill an unarmed man in front of witnesses. Become exactly what your father feared you'd become. The cantina was silent. 20 people watching, waiting. The moment stretched like pulled wire. Then Snake Eyes spoke. Jake, look at me. Jake raised his eyes, met at Snake Eyes' pale gaze. I was there that night, Snake Eyes said quietly. I rode with Crowley's gang then. I was one of the men in your yard. Jake's stomach lurched. What? I was younger, stupider, thought Crowley's cause was righteous. I was there when your father died. Snake Eyes turned to face Crowley, and everything he just told you is a lie. Crowley's smile faltered for the first time. There was no shot from inside the house. Snake Eyes continued, I would have heard it, would have seen the muzzle flash. What happened was simple. We rode and your father came out to meet us. Crowley shot him. Clean shot to the chest. Your father fell. You and the Taw ran out the back. We chased you into the wilderness. Lost you in the dark. You're lying to protect him, Crowley snapped. Why would I? I've admitted to worse. Hell, I helped kill his dog. Why would I lie about this? Snake Eyes pulled his own folded paper from his coat. This is the real coroner's report. The one filed in Tucson. Bullet entered from the front. Passed through the heart. .45 caliber, which matches Crowley's pistol, not a .44 rifle round. He tossed it on the table next to Crowley's forgery. Crowley's been planning this for 9 years. Had time to forge documents. Buy off witnesses who weren't there. Build a story that would break you. But he made one mistake. Snake Eyes smiled. He didn't count on the one man who was actually there having a conscience. Jake picked up both documents. Compared them. Snake Eyes' was official. Territorial seal. Signatures. Crowley's was good but not good enough. Wrong seal. Wrong signatures. The truth settled over Jake like a blanket. He hadn't killed his father. Had never fired a shot that night. The guilt he'd carried for 6 years was built on a lie. Just another of Crowley's manipulations. Jake looked up, met Crowley's eyes, saw the rage there, the plan falling apart. All of it, Jake said slowly. Every piece, the 5 men, the manipulations, the lies about Ezekiel's death. Ethan, all of it was just to make me believe I'd killed my own father. You did kill him, Crowley hissed. Maybe not with a bullet, but with your existence. Your father died protecting you. If you'd never been born, he'd be alive. That blood's on your hands regardless. No, Jake's voice was steel now, clear, certain. That blood's on yours. You pulled the trigger. You chose murder. You spent 9 years in prison planning revenge on a dead man by torturing his son. But you failed. Because I'm not broken. I'm not the monster you wanted me to be. He raised the Colt again, aimed at Crowley's heart. And I'm not my father. I don't need courts and judges to know what justice looks like. Crowley's hand moved inside his coat. Fast, practiced. He pulled a Derringer small caliber, but deadly at close range. Both men fired. Jake's shot hit Crowley's shoulder, spun him sideways, not a killing shot. Deliberate. Aimed. Crowley's shot went wide, punching through the cantina wall. The old man collapsed, clutching his wounded shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. His face twisted with pain and rage. "You should have killed me," Crowley gasped. "Should have put me down like a rabid dog." "No," Jake lowered the Colt. "You're going to live, going to stand trial, going to face every charge my father brought against you, plus conspiracy to murder, plus everything you've done since. You're going to die legally, in a cell or on a scaffold. That's justice." He turned to the watching crowd. "Witnesses, you saw him draw first, saw me defend myself, saw him confess to killing Marshal Thomas Brennan. Anyone willing to testify?" Silence. Then an old Mexican man, the bartender, spoke up. "I will testify. I remember the Marshal. Good man, he deserves justice." Others nodded. A prospector, a woman who worked the cantina, even one of the rough-looking men at the bar. Crowley had no friends here, just people who'd taken his money and felt no loyalty. Snake Eyes moved to bind Crowley's wound. The old man spat at him. "Traitor, I made you, gave you purpose. You gave me lies. Jake gave me truth. I know which one I'm keeping." Jake turned to Ethan. The boy stood, frozen tears running down his face. The forged journal lay on the floor at his feet. "Ethan," Jake said softly, "I'm sorry. I should have stayed. Should have been there for you. I was wrong." He said, "You killed my father. Your father died in his sleep, peacefully, like we told you. I held his hand when he passed. His last words were about you. He said, 'Take care of my boy. Make sure he grows up right.'" Jake's voice broke. "I failed that. I ran instead of staying. But I never hurt him. I loved him like my own father." Ethan's face crumpled. All the anger, the hate, the pain of 3 years collapsed inward. He was 12 years old again, lost and scared, looking for someone to make sense of the world. Jake holstered his gun, opened his arms. Ethan ran to him, crashed into Jake's chest, sobbing. Jake held him tight the way Ezekiel had held Jake after his father died. The way men hold the broken pieces of each other and hope it's enough. "I'm sorry," Ethan gasped through tears. "I believed him. I wanted to kill you." "I know, it's okay. You're okay now." They stood like that while Snake Eyes finished binding Crowley and the cantina slowly returned to normal. Life in Diablo Canyon was hard. Violence was common. This was just another night's drama. But for Jake, it was everything. It was the end of 6 years running, 6 years of guilt and shame and isolation, 6 years of being less than whole. He hadn't killed his father, hadn't betrayed Ezekiel, hadn't become the monster Crowley promised. He was just Jake Brennan, 18 years old, tired, wounded, but still standing. The territorial marshal arrived 2 days later, a man named Carson, lean and hard-eyed, who listened to the testimonies and examined the evidence. He arrested Crowley on multiple charges: murder, conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder. The list went on. Crowley was transported to Tucson in chains. He never made it to trial. 3 weeks later, he died in his cell. Heart failure, the doctor said. But Jake always wondered if it was something else. If a man built entirely on hate could survive when that hate was finally defeated. Jake stayed in Diablo Canyon for a month, helped Ethan process everything, explained what had really happened, showed him the real documents, the true evidence. Slowly, the poison Crowley had planted began to drain. Doc Kane recovered enough to travel. He rode back to Tucson with Jake, and Ethan testified at the preliminary hearings. Then he disappeared. Jake heard years later that Doc had gone east, gotten sober, opened a small practice in a town that needed a doctor, and didn't ask too many questions. Good ending for a man who'd chosen truth when it mattered. Snake Eyes stayed with them for 2 weeks, then drifted west. I've got debts to pay, he said. People I wronged before I met Crowley. Time to make things right. Jake never saw him again. But years later, he heard stories. A half-Apache tracker who worked with law enforcement, helping find lost children recovering stolen property. A man who turned his skills to good after years of using them for evil. Another good ending. As for Ethan, Jake kept his promise to Ezekiel. He didn't run this time. He stayed, taught the boy everything he knew, hunting, tracking, survival, but also honor truth, the importance of choosing right even when it cost everything. When Ethan turned 16, he enlisted in the Army, served with distinction, became a scout, then an officer, wrote to Jake regularly, called him brother the way he had when they were young, and Jake, he went back to the wilderness, back to his trap lines and his solitary camps. But it was different now. He wasn't running anymore, wasn't hiding. He was just living, choosing silence over noise, choosing simplicity over complexity. He never got another dog. Couldn't. Red had been unique. Replacing him felt like betrayal. He never married, never settled in a town, just moved through the territories, following the seasons, following the game. A ghost, some call him, the legend of Iron Jake Brennan, the young man who'd killed 5 men and faced down the devil himself. But Jake knew the truth. He'd killed 2 men, Tommy and one of the hired guns. The others had died through accident, through choice, through the chaos of Crowley's machinations. Not innocent deaths, but not murders either. He carried them anyway. Every one. Their names, their faces, the weight of what their deaths had cost. Not as guilt, but as responsibility, as reminder, as the price of walking the path he'd chosen. Years passed. Decades. Jake drifted north into Montana, trapped beaver and marten, guided hunting parties in the summer, lived alone except for the occasional visitor. Ethan came twice, brought his children, showed them the old man who'd saved their father. And slowly Jake grew old. Montana, 1952. The fire had burned down again. Will sat transfixed, his coffee cold in his hands. That's it, Will asked. You just went back to the wilderness. That's it, Jake confirmed. I could have stayed in civilization. Could have leveraged the legend into a career. Lawman maybe, scout, but I'd seen what that life cost. Seen what my father's badge had demanded of him. Seen what carrying guns did to a man's soul. But you carried guns for years after. For hunting, for survival. Never for men again. Jake stood, walked to the mantel, took down the old Winchester. This rifle has killed deer, elk, bear, fed me and others for 67 years. But it never killed another human after that summer. And I made sure of that. Will stood too. Grandpa, what are you saying? That I shouldn't fight, that I shouldn't go to Korea? No, Jake turned to face his grandson. I'm saying understand the difference. You're a soldier. You'll kill if ordered. That's duty. That's honor. That's serving something bigger than yourself. It's not the same as what I did. What I almost became. He set the rifle down, walked to Will, placed both hands on the young man's shoulders. I killed Tommy Harlan in hot blood. Righteous anger. Legal but dirty in my soul. I wounded Crowley in cold blood. Calculated. Controlled. Legal but clean in my soul. That's the difference. Not the killing. The why. The how. The choice you make in that moment when the gun's in your hand and a man's life is on the trigger. How do I know which is which? You won't, not always. War's chaos. But remember this, every man you kill you carry. Forever. In dreams, in quiet moments, in the faces of strangers. You carry them, so make sure they're worth carrying. Make sure when you're 85 and looking back, you can live with the weight. Will's eyes glistened. I'm scared, Grandpa. Good. Fear keeps you careful, keeps you human. Jake pulled him into a hug, brief and fierce. You come back, you hear me, come back and tell me your stories. And I'll help you carry whatever weight you bring home. They stood like that for a moment. 2 men, 66 years apart, bound by blood and story, and the understanding that comes from truth told complete. Finally, Will stepped back. I should sleep. Bus comes early. It does. Will paused at the bedroom door. The 5 men you hunted. Do you regret it? Jake was quiet for a long time. I regret Tommy. He died believing lies, and I could have tried harder to show him truth before I pulled the trigger. The others, complicated. Some died by choice, some by accident, some by their own stupidity, but they're all dead and I'm alive, and that's something I've had to live with. Do you think you made the right choices? Some, not all, but I made them, owned them, lived with the consequences. That's all any man can do. Will nodded, understood or thought he did. He'd understand better after Korea, after he came back carrying his own weight, if he came back. After Will had gone, Jake sat alone in the dark cabin. Outside, the Montana night was clear, stars sharp and cold, the same stars that had looked down on him in Arizona 67 years ago. He thought about Red, about Tommy's surprised eyes, about Crowley's smile faltering, about Ethan's tears, about all the moments that had shaped him from a bush into a man, into an old ghost sitting alone. From a shelf, he pulled out a small wooden box, opened it. Inside was a dog collar, cracked leather brass buckle, tarnished. Red's collar, saved all these years. And beside it, 6 playing cards. Ace of spades, 5 he'd placed on bodies. One he'd kept, the one meant for Crowley, that he'd never used. Jake held the unused card, turned it over in his gnarled fingers. I didn't become what you wanted, he said to the memory of Crowley, to the ghost of hate. I became what my father hoped for, what Ezekiel taught, what Red deserved. Took me a while, cost more than it should have, but I got there. He put the card back, closed the box, set it on the shelf. Tomorrow Will would leave, would go to war, would face his own choices, his own moments of truth. And Jake would wait here in this cabin, at the edge of wilderness, ready to help carry whatever weight came back, if anything came back. But tonight the story was told, the truth spoken, the weight shared. Jake walked to the window, looked out at the snow-covered pines, and there, just for a moment, he could have sworn he saw movement, a flash of reddish fur, a tail wagging, eyes bright with simple joy. He blinked, nothing there but shadows and snow, but he smiled anyway. Waited long enough, didn't you, old boy, he whispered. Sorry it took me so long to tell it, to admit it, to let it go. The wind moved through the pines. If you listened close, if you wanted to believe, it almost sounded like a bark. Joyful, forgiving, free. Jake touched the cold glass. See you soon, Red, but not yet. Gotta make sure the boy comes home first. Then we'll see. He turned from the window, built up the fire one more time, settled into his chair with a blanket and the rifle across his lap. The way he'd slept for 67 years, ready, watchful, alone but not lonely. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient dance. The snow held the world in silence. And somewhere between memory and dream, between a truth and story, a boy and a dog ran together through wilderness that never ended, chasing trails that never faded, bound by love that death couldn't break. Jake's eyes closed. Sleep came gentle. And in his dreams, he was 18 again, riding through Badlands, with the sun on his face and Red running ahead, always looking back to make sure he was following. Always waiting, always faithful, always home. 3 months later, a letter arrived at the cabin. Will's handwriting shaky but legible. He was in Korea. He was alive. He was scared but okay. He'd killed 2 men in a firefight. He was carrying them, but he was still himself, still human, still trying to choose right. Jake read the letter 3 times. Then he wrote back, told Will about the first year after Diablo Canyon, about learning to live with weight, about finding peace not in forgetting but in remembering right, about choosing every day to be better than yesterday's choices. More letters came, more stories. Will survived Korea, came home, married, had children, built a life, and every few years he'd come to Montana, sit with his grandfather, share weight, find strength in the sharing. Jake lived to 93. Died in his sleep into the cabin, the Winchester on the wall, Red's collar in the box on the shelf. They found him in his chair facing the window, a smile on his weathered face. Will buried him beside a stream in the high country. No marker. Jake wouldn't have wanted one. Just a grave in wilderness, the way Ezekiel was buried, the way men who live free should rest. But Will told the story, told his children, his grandchildren. Pass down the truth about choices and consequences and the difference between justice and revenge. About a boy who lost everything, became a killer, then chose to become something better. About Red, the faithful companion whose death started it all. About Crowley, the devil who thought hate could corrupt everything. About 5 men who died believing lies or lived to learn truth. And about Jake Brennan, who learned that the hardest hunt isn't tracking prey through wilderness. It's tracking yourself through darkness. Finding the line between what you are and what you could become, and choosing every day which side of that line to stand on. The story spread, changed with each telling, became legend, became myth, became the kind of story old men tell young men before they go to war. And somewhere in the telling, in the passing down, in the weight shared across generations, Red's death meant something. Tommy's death meant something. All of it, the blood and the pain and the terrible choices, meant something. Because one man chose justice over revenge, chose mercy over murder, chose to carry weight instead of spreading it. And that choice, made by an 18-year-old boy in a cantina in a dying town, echoed down through the years. Through Will's war, through his children's struggles, through every moment when someone stood at the crossroads between what's easy and what's right. That's the real legend of Iron Jake Brennan. Not that he was fast with a gun, not that he killed 5 men, not that he faced down evil and survived, but that he chose, consciously, deliberately, to be better than the worst thing that ever happened to him. And in the end, standing at the edge of forever with Red's ghost waiting patient in the shadows, that choice was enough. The story ends where it began, with death and loss and the question of what happens next. But the answer is different now, clearer. What happens next is choice, always choice, every moment, every breath. We carry our dead, our mistakes, our regrets, but we don't have to become them. We can choose justice over revenge, truth over lies, mercy over murder. And in choosing and carrying the weight with open eyes and steady hands, we honor the ones we've lost. We redeem the blood. We make the pain mean something. That's what Jake learned. That's what he passed to Will. That's what Will passed down through the generations. And somewhere in Montana, in high country, where the streams run cold and clear, there's a grave with no marker. Just earth and stone and memory. But if you listen close on quiet nights, you might hear something. A bark, a whisper, a story being told one more time to someone who needs to hear it. About a boy, a dog, and the long hunt for something worth more than revenge. Something called peace. The fire burns low, the story's told, the weight is shared, and Red runs in through memory, forever young, forever faithful, forever free, waiting for his boy to finish the path, to complete the hunt, to come home at last to wilderness that never ends and love that never dies. Almost there now, almost home. The last hunt is nearly done.